This is insane. Ever had that moment where you're rewatching a Marvel movie and suddenly catch a genius detail you never noticed before? Yeah, Marvel loves doing that. Honestly, they might love hiding Easter eggs even more than post-credit scenes. Today, the mission is simple. Uncover some of the most insane MCU Easter eggs and hidden details you probably missed. And one detail in this video will change the way you see Marvel forever. In Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2, when Ego starts regenerating, the last part of him to come back is his left eye. And no, that's not random. It's a direct reference to Snake, the character played by Kurt Russell in Escape from New York. Marvel's the kind of studio that hides a full meta joke inside a single eyeball. And here's another insane Guardians detail. After Yondu dies, he's cremated in space, and his ashes turn into a flecha, the exact same arrow that became his signature weapon. Even in death, the man stays iconic. In Ant-Man, Scott Lang breaks into a Stark facility to steal a part, only to realize it's basically turned into the Avengers' new base. And if you pause at the right moment when he arrives, you can actually see the mark left on the grass by Thor during Age of Ultron. Marvel does not forget. And speaking of Marvel planning way ahead, at the end of that movie, Scott gets trapped in the quantum realm and everything turns into this psychedelic nightmare. But for a split second, you can see the outline of Janet Van Dyne, the original Wasp. Back then, it sounded like a fan theory, until Ant-Man and the Wasp confirmed it was a real clue planted from the start. In Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 1, there's a subtle joke that connects two worlds. Bradley Cooper, the voice of Rocket, also starred in The Hangover, where he mocks Alan's man purse. Guardians basically repeats that exact energy, making it feel like Rocket is roasting the same type of guy across universes. In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, there's a slick Easter egg during the reality hopping sequence. Strange passes by the same car associated with Uncle Ben, but it's also the exact car that appears in Evil Dead and other Sam Raimi films. Raimi was leaving his fingerprints all over the multiverse. In Thor Ragnarok, when Thor returns to Asgard and realizes Loki is disguised as Odin, he threatens to crush Loki's face with Mjolnir, and that moment is pulled straight from the comics, or Narp 359, where Loki's spell triggers a similar threat. And Marvel tells story through visuals too. During Odin's farewell, the rock between Loki and the rest of the family becomes a symbol of emotional distance. Even in silence, the film is speaking. Then in combat, Thor, Loki, and Hela all use the same fighting motion, hinting that Odin trained all three in the same style. And before Thor faces Hela, he walks past a cracked mural, cracked right through the eye. The exact eye Thor ends up losing. In Spider-Man Far From Home, the post-credit scene reveals Fury and Hill were Skrulls the whole time, but the movie planted clues. In Captain Marvel, Fury says nobody calls him Nick. No Nicholas, no Joseph, just Fury. Yet in Far From Home, Fury slips into dialogue in ways that don't fully match the real one. He even tells Peter that Beck is from Earth, just not yours, which sounds off, because a real Earth Fury would have said ours. And finally, when Peter kisses MJ at the end, look at the license plate behind them. The Amazing Spider-Man 143, the issue where Peter shares his first kiss with Mary Jane, and here, MJ is Michelle Jones. Marvel hides history in plain sight. Captain America. The Winter Soldier has a more grounded tone, and even its references feel darker. On Nick Fury's fake grave, it says, "The path of the righteous man." Ezekiel 25:17. The same quote Samuel L. Jackson's character drops before going off in Pulp Fiction. It's the MCU winking at his most iconic role. And near the end, there's a visual clue teasing a future villain. When Rumlow is messed up on the stretcher, the straps on his uniform form an X shape, hinting at the look of Crossbones, who he becomes later. Now, Iron Man 3 isn't exactly everyone's favorite, and yeah, a lot of people don't love it. But there's a behind-the-scenes detail that's genuinely wild. When Pepper is crying over Tony, director Shane Black revealed he took inspiration from the funeral of Ayrton Senna, one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. That emotional tone wasn't accidental. In Infinity War, T'Challa almost feels like a prophet. It continues a joke from Black Panther. He says, "I never free," and then ends up frozen. Later in Infinity War, he says Thanos will only get blood and dust, and that's exactly what happened. Dust now, blood later in Endgame. There's also a small emotional detail between Thanos and Gamora. She complains about the throne, saying she always hated that chair, and Thanos calmly replies that she said that before. Then, instead of sitting on the throne, he sits on the steps. It's subtle, but it shows he listens. In his twisted way, he cares. In the Avengers, when SHIELD starts gathering the heroes, everyone gets digital files on tablets, screens, except Steve Rogers. He gets everything printed out on paper because he's still adapting to the modern world. It's a simple detail, but it instantly reminds you he's a man out of time. And there's an even cooler one in that dark mountain scene where Thor and Loki are talking. If you look closely, you can spot two ravens watching them. For comic fans, that's huge. Those are Hugin and Munin, Odin's spies, the ones who fly around collecting information. What makes it even better is that they didn't officially appear in the MCU until Thor, The Dark World. So this is like a stealth cameo before the official debut. Another classic hidden reference is A113, the famous code that shows up in Pixar movie. It pops up here too. It's basically a tribute code used by artists who studied in room A113 at CalArts, and it's become a signature Easter egg across animation and film culture. In No Way Home, the Easter eggs are non-stop. In Happy's laundry room, there's a framed picture of Tony's old workshop. It feels like a quiet message that Pepper didn't want it sitting around anymore, but Happy couldn't let it go. On a security monitor, you can even spot a prototype version of Captain America's shield. And there's a subtle Star Wars gag. When Peter gets his university letters, the robot destroys a Lego Death Star, just like it did in the first Spider-Man movie. That's not random. The Death Star is destroyed in the first and third films of the original Star Wars trilogy, mirroring how it happens in Spider-Man's first and third movies too. In Captain America, the first Avenger, Red Skull's human mask reveal might seem sudden, but the film plants clues early. You can see a seam in his skin that becomes more obvious. He adjusts his face in one scene, and even his portrait uses only red tone. If you rewind a few frames at the right moment, you can briefly catch his true face before the full reveal. After the Battle of New York, Stark Tower is wrecked, but only the giant letter A stays standing. That's such a clean visual hint that the building is about to become Avengers Tower, long before the story outright confirms it. In Civil War, Marvel does that connected universe thing where even small background details matter. There's a drawing in the background that Steve made during World War II, showing how emotionally trapped he still is in that time. And that matters because it foreshadows his true ending, returning to the past to be with Peggy. That's character storytelling without a single word of dialogue. Then look at War Machine's armor. It has small markings that represent Ultron drones he took down in Age of Ultron. That's a real military tradition, marking victories on the vehicle. And because Rhodey comes from the military world, he carries that ritual onto his suit. One of the best comic movie details ever is when they recreate iconic panels. Civil War does it multiple times. Hawkeye's scarring arrow shot mirrors Avengers The Badger 223, and the final standoff recreates the cover of Civil War number 7 almost perfectly. It's the comic literally turning into live action. One of the funniest little Easter eggs happens when Colonel Chester gives Steve a ride and hits a red boost button labeled K, a nod to Agent K from Men in Black, played by Tommy Lee Jones. And as Steve evolves, his shield evolves too. First, it's basically a trash can lid, then a taxi door with a star, then a more classic style shield, until it becomes the iconic round version. It's the symbol growing as the hero grows. Marvel even recreates the classic Captain America #1 cover in live action, with Steve punching Hitler. Even the Incredible Hulk, which Marvel often treats like it barely exists, has amazing details. Bruce hides in a pizzeria run by a friendly old man. And that actor is Paul Soles, the voice of Spider-Man in the 1960s cartoon. The character's name is Stanley, a tribute to Stan Lee, whose real name was Stanley Martin Lieber. And when Ross grabs the serum for Blonsky, the label reads Dr. Reinstein, tied to the creator of Cap's serum, plus it references Vita Rays and the Weapons Plus program. Finally, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Scott's friend's business is failing early on. And in the final scene, when things are finally going well, even the filling changes color, from red to blue. It's a quiet visual way of showing success without saying a word. In Thor, Love and Thunder, while Thor is trying to lose the endgame belly, there's a quick but hilarious detail. He's wearing a hat that says, Strongest Avenger. It's a perfect callback to Ragnarok, where he tries to use that exact phrase as a password, and fails miserably. Marvel loves that kind of self-aware humor, the kind that rewards fans who actually remember the small stuff. And the hat isn't just a random joke either. The logo on it matches the classic branding from the earliest Thor comics, which makes it even better. It's one of those blink and you miss it details that mixes nostalgia with comedy. Now, in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, there's a scene early on that hits way harder than most people realize. Queen Ramonda tells Shuri that when she finally decided to move forward, she burned the suit and felt a soft breeze, almost like T'Challa was still there with her. It's subtle, quiet, and emotional, but that moment becomes even heavier near the end. Because when Shuri does the same thing, when she burns the suit herself, she also feels that gentle breeze, and the movie cuts to images of Chadwick Boseman. It's like the film is telling you, without saying a word, that she felt her brother's presence one last time too. Whether you see it as spiritual or simply symbolic, it lands like a punch to the chest. And then Shuri meets her nephew, which adds another layer to everything. What makes this scene even more powerful is that Shuri, who always resisted the mystical side of Wakanda, ends up experiencing something that mirrors her mother's moment perfectly, without the movie having to force it into magic. It's grief told through emotion, memory, and atmosphere. Over in Spider-Man Homecoming, there's a detail in Peter's room that says a lot about how the MCU world sees its heroes. On his wall, there are portraits of legendary scientists like Newton, Tesla, and Bruce Banner. That's important because it frames Hulk not just as a raging Avenger, but as Dr. Banner, a respected scientific mind, someone who belongs next to history's greatest thinkers. Then, when Peter gets sent to the principal's office, you can spot a black and white photo. It's Jim Morita, a member of the Howling Commandos who fought with Captain America in World War II. The cool part? He's played by the same actor who plays the modern-day principal, which is Marvel's slick way of making a double casting feel intentional instead of awkward. And one of the smallest details tells a whole story without dialogue. When Peter opens his locker, you can see scratches along the top. That tiny mark implies he's done this before, over and over, like it's part of his routine. It's storytelling through wear and tear. Finally, in Avengers, Age of Ultron, when Tony is scrolling through AI system names, one of them is Jocasta. In the comics, she's Ultron's android bride, created by him. The MCU still hasn't used her, but the seed was planted years ago.